Midterm elections, Trump administration officials reportedly toyed with the idea of using a microwave heat ray to deter migrants from crossing the border. The New York Times reports that Customs and Border Protection officials reportedly floated the idea in a meeting with top leaders of the Department of Homeland Security in October of 2018, the same day that the White House stressed in a separate meeting with the DHS secretary that extreme action was needed to stop migrants. According to the paper, the heat ray was designed 2 decades ago by the military as a crowd control device to make people's skin feel as if it was burning when they get within range of its invisible beams. The Times reports the device had been largely abandoned amid doubts over its effectiveness and morality. Then Homeland Security Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen reportedly denounced the suggestion and asked that it not be brought up in meetings again. While it is unclear if the president was aware of the idea, he has suggested other extreme measures, including the installation of flesh-piercing spikes on the border wall, building a moat filled with snakes and alligators, and shooting migrants in the legs. Willie.
If I didn't know better, that story would read like a parody of someone doing the most extreme, ugly, ineffective, immoral things possible at the border, but they were on the table. We also have an update, Mika, on the naturalization ceremony that was featured Tuesday night at the RNC. 2 of the women who were sworn in as citizens at the White House told the Wall Street Journal they did not know video of the ceremony would be used at the RNC. One of the women said, while she filled out a media release form, she does not remember being informed about being a part of the convention. Both women, by the way, said they did not mind being featured at the convention. And, of course, they're still celebrating their new citizenship. Jason Johnson, this is of a piece of a conversation we've been happening about the Hatch Act. Obviously, if they weren't told about that, that's gross, that they were being used as political props there in a beautiful ceremony for them personally. But this is a larger conversation about using the White House, we'll see it again tonight, as part of a political convention, a clear violation of laws and acts and rules and mores that have been in place now for generations. The Trump administration just erasing those lines with this convention.
Yeah, and Willie, if you think about the report that Mika just did about the president basically wanting a Austin Powers Dr. Evil death ray at the border, right? And that's how he feels about refugees. That's how he feels about people who are trying to come to this country to find a better life. So it's another demonstration how the president not only doesn't care, but will then use the very same people who he says comes from S-hole countries and don't deserve the American dream and don't deserve to participate. He will then foist those people upon the public using my tax money, mind you. Look, if I want to vote for Trump, I can vote for Trump, but I don't want him taking my tax money to promote his campaign. But that is the kind of violation of norms and a lack of respect for the laws that run this country that we've seen since the moment he stepped into office.
Yeah, last night after Vice President Mike Pence's speech at the RNC, the audience crowded a rope line closely together, mostly without masks, to greet President Trump, to greet the First Lady, Mike Pence, the Second Lady, Karen Pence, something we haven't seen in months. While it's unclear exactly who is in the audience and whether they were tested for COVID-19, here's what we do know about testing at the First Lady's address on Tuesday night. Not all attendees at Melania Trump's Rose Garden address were tested for coronavirus ahead of her remarks, according to White House and campaign officials. Guests who were in the first few rows for her speech and interacted either with the president, the First Lady, Vice President, or Second Lady were screened for the virus prior to the remarks, but dozens of others in the audience were not. Chairs were slightly apart, but not separated a full 6 feet. The same health and safety protocols, which have been in place at the White House for the last several months during the pandemic, are expected to be applied to President Trump's acceptance speech tonight on the South Lawn, where more than 1,000 people are anticipated. NBC News has asked whether the Trump campaign or White House has conducted actual testing for that and who covered the costs incurred, because it's a campaign event, but have yet to receive a response. And I want to point out, as I toss to you, Willie, that basically any of these events where people are squashed together and they're not wearing masks are super spreader events, where the virus that kills people is passed from person to person, and they're doing this at the behest of the Trump campaign. They're doing this to see their president, and I don't know how else you see it except the president endangering the lives of his followers so he can get a picture of people clapping for him.
Well, it fits in the narrative of this convention, which is that the pandemic is largely behind us, and President Trump is the one who stopped it, which, of course, is not true whatsoever. 180,000 people are dead, 30 million people are out of work. But if you don't wear a mask and you don't distance at the convention, it sends that signal to your supporters that, yes, we've done the job. Yes, it is behind us, when, of course, it's not. Meanwhile, the Trump administration officials are defending a new CDC recommendation that calls for people without COVID-19 symptoms to abstain from testing. Even as scientists warn, the policy could hinder an already weak federal response as schools reopen and a fall wave looms. There were conflicting reports over who was responsible for initiating that order. According to the New York Times, 2 federal health officials said the shift came as a directive to the CDC from higher-ups at the White House and the Department of Health and Human Services. But Admiral Brett Giroir, the administration's coronavirus testing czar, called it a CDC action. He did acknowledge, though, the revision came after a vigorous debate among members of the White House Coronavirus Task Force. According to an Axios report, Dr. Anthony Fauci was in surgery under general anesthesia when the task force approved the revisions to the CDC testing recommendations last Thursday. And Dr. Fauci was asked about it later and said it was just an unfortunate coincidence that he was in surgery when that decision was finally made. So, Jason, as we wrap the show here and we wrap the RNC convention tonight with a speech from President Trump, what is your takeaway from this week about the message Republicans want to put out about the country?
Willie, they don't have a message. Usually in an election, it's between 2 parties who more or less agree on the rules and decide that they're going to seek votes. The Democrats are trying to have an election. The Republicans are trying to destroy the UPS, debunk voting opportunities, and prevent people from actually voting them out of office. This week has been nothing but a performance for a dictator in training. That's how it should be seen. People need to get ready to get rid of this guy and vote, because he does not care about your vote. He only wants to stay in power.
On that note, that does it for us this morning. Stephanie Rule picks up the coverage right now.
Thanks, Mika. Hi there. I'm Stephanie Rule. It is Thursday, August 27th, and we must start this morning with breaking news. Hurricane Laura pounding the Gulf Coast as we speak, slamming a huge section of Louisiana with floodwaters and 100-mile-an-hour winds. This is a life-threatening storm, the likes of which they have not seen in the state in more than 160 years. This storm means business. It came ashore in Cameron Parish overnight as a strong Category 4. It is now down to a Category 2 hurricane as it moves north. We are starting to see some signs of flooding in southern Louisiana, while the National Hurricane Center has said the storm's surge could flood areas 40 miles from the coast. The video we are seeing so far shows windows being blown out, trees pulled straight out of the ground, rain and wind blowing sideways. More than 500,000 people were under orders to evacuate. Most of them did it, but remember, this is happening during COVID.